In the great annals of English royalty, where names like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I burn brightly in history's memory, some figures are left in the margins quiet, loyal, and sometimes tragically overlooked. One of these figures was Arthur Plantagenet, known to history as Viscount Lisle, and more poignantly, as the forgotten uncle of Henry VIII. Born in uncertain circumstances and raised far from the throne, Arthur was the illegitimate son of King Edward IV, a man whose legacy he could never fully claim, yet whose blood coursed through his veins. Despite his royal lineage, Arthur's life was shaped more by service, duty, and quiet resilience than by power or ambition. In the shifting tides of Tudor England, his was a life of quiet consequence, a story of loyalty, family, and unfortunate misfortune. Arthur Plantagenet was born around 1461 to 1466. The precise year unclear, as was often the case with children born out of wedlock. His father, Edward IV, was a towering figure in the Wars of the Roses, the first Yorkist king of England. Arthur's mother, Elizabeth Waite, was not a queen or noblewoman, but likely a woman of modest background. This made Arthur a royal bastard, which, while it closed some doors, did not completely lock him out of the corridors of power. He was raised not in the opulent halls of Westminster, but more quietly, possibly under the care of his mother. And yet, he bore the Plantagenet name, and that name carried both privilege and peril. As the younger brother of princes and nobles, Arthur grew up during a dangerous time. The War of the Roses had torn England apart, and even as peace was temporarily restored, the Yorkist legacy hung in a delicate balance. Though he did not play a direct role in these early conflicts, Arthur's lineage meant his life would forever be affected by them. Despite being the son of a Yorkist king, Arthur's rise came under the Tudor dynasty. This unlikely allegiance was forged through family. His half-sister Elizabeth of York married Henry VII, uniting the houses of York and Lancaster. That union produced Henry VIII, making Arthur the young prince's maternal uncle. Although Arthur never publicly flaunted this role, his proximity to the crown was undeniable. He entered the court of Henry VIII and served in various administrative and diplomatic roles, valued for his loyalty and discretion. Unlike other courtiers who schemed for titles or land, Arthur was noted for his calm demeanor, reliability, and humility. He was knighted and held the post of Vice-Admiral of England, later becoming governor of Calais, England's crucial foothold on the continent. His appointment as Viscount Lisle in 1523 was a formal acknowledgement of his standing. The title came through his wife, Honor Grenville, a noblewoman whose first husband had held claims to the Lisle title. Though not a peer by birth, Arthur was now firmly among the English nobility, a rare rise for an illegitimate child of a king. Arthur's marriage to Honor Grenville brought him into stepfatherhood and introduced new responsibilities. His household in Calais became well known, and his family was large and active in court circles. He was deeply attached to his wife and stepchildren, and their correspondence remains one of the richest sources of Tudor domestic life. In fact, the Lisle Letters, an extensive collection of personal and political correspondence between Arthur, his family, and the court, became an invaluable historical archive. These letters painted Arthur not as a power-hungry noble, but as a father, husband, and servant of the crown, concerned with the education of his children, the running of his estates, and the politics of the time. The letters reveal a man devoted to his wife, often deferring to her guidance in political matters and trusting her insight. His household also became a center of patronage, with people from across England and beyond writing to him, hoping for jobs, favors, or recommendations. It was through these interactions that Arthur became entangled in political suspicions, not of his own doing, but due to the actions of those within his circle. In 1540, Arthur's loyalty was questioned in a most unexpected and tragic way. A group of his servants were accused of conspiring with enemies of the crown. Letters were intercepted that suggested sensitive communication with foreign powers. Though there was no direct evidence that Arthur himself had committed any act of treason, he was nonetheless arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. The suspicion was enough. For a man who had spent his life in loyal service, the accusation was deeply wounding. He protested his innocence repeatedly, but the political climate of Henry VIII's later reign was tense and unforgiving. The king, growing increasingly paranoid and unpredictable, had ordered the executions of friends, advisors, and even his own wives. Arthur, though family, was not immune to suspicion. He spent nearly 2 years in the Tower, never formally tried and never condemned. The king eventually ordered his release in 1542, seemingly acknowledging that there had been no true case against him. But the relief came too late. Upon hearing the news of his release, Arthur collapsed and died, likely from the stress and exhaustion of imprisonment. It was a quiet end for a quiet man. Arthur Plantagenet never ruled, never led armies, and never rebelled. And yet, his life reflects the intricacies of royal bloodlines, the burden of proximity to power, and the dangers of court politics. His real legacy lies not in titles or triumphs, but in the Lisle Letters, which today remain a vivid record of Tudor life. Historians value these documents for their detail, their tone, and their authenticity. They provide insights into everything from court fashion and marriage politics to military affairs and domestic routines. Arthur's voice, often modest and thoughtful, is present throughout. He was not a schemer nor a warrior, but rather a man who tried to balance duty, a family, and honor in a world that offered little reward for loyalty without ambition. Arthur Plantagenet's life is a reminder that history is not only made by those who shout the loudest or conquer the most lands. Sometimes it is also shaped by those who serve quietly, support others, and who remain dignified even when wrongly accused. He was the forgotten uncle of Henry VIII, a son of Edward IV, and a man who, despite the twists of fate, never stopped trying to live with honor. His story is one of noble resilience, tragic misunderstanding, and quiet impact. In a kingdom filled with ambition, betrayal, and drama, Arthur Plantagenet stood apart, a loyal man who never asked for more than to serve, love, and live in peace. Today, his name may not sit among the great rulers, but his story still whispers from the pages of letters that refuse to be forgotten.